The cargo hauler shook violently as red warning lights flooded every corner of the cabin. Owen Hayes gripped his seat while the ship fell through the atmosphere like a broken toy. Metal screamed around him. The 3 alien crew members made sounds of terror in their own languages. "Brace positions now," Owen shouted over the noise. He pulled the emergency straps tighter across his chest. Through the cracked viewport, he saw white. Just endless white, rushing up to meet them. Trill, the bird-like alien in the navigation seat, chirped frantically while trying to find a clear landing zone. Her feathers stood on end. "There is no safe ground. All sensors show forest and ice." "Then we hit the trees," Owen said. "Better than flat ice at this speed." The reptilian engineer Bohr hissed from his station. "The hull will not survive impact with vegetation." "The hull won't survive anything at this point," Owen replied. He grabbed the manual controls even though they barely responded. "Hold on." The ship punched through the cloud layer. Giant trees appeared below them, covered in snow and ice. Owen pulled hard on the controls, trying to angle their descent. The ship clipped the top of one massive tree, then another. Branches exploded against the hull. The sound was deafening. They hit the ground sideways. Owen's head smacked against something hard. Everything went dark for a moment. When his eyes opened again, the ship had stopped moving. Smoke filled the cabin. Cold air rushed in through a dozen new holes in the walls. "Sound off," Owen called out, unbuckling himself. His ribs hurt, but nothing felt broken. "Everyone alive?" "I function," Bohr said weakly. The reptilian alien was already shivering. His scales had turned a darker color. "Alive," Trill chirped. She hugged herself with her wing arms. "So cold. Why is it so cold?" Owen looked for the 4th crew member. Nessa, the amphibious navigator, lay crumpled near her station. He rushed over and checked her pulse, still alive but unconscious. Her skin looked dry and pale. The temperature gauge on the wall read -28 degrees. Owen felt the cold, but his body was already adjusting. Years of training kicked in. He moved to the emergency locker and pulled out the survival kit. "We need to activate the distress beacon," he said, finding the device and switching it on. A green light blinked to life. "Good. It's working." "How long until rescue?" Trill asked. Her beak chattered. She had wrapped her wings around herself but continued to shake. Owen checked the beacon's display. 14 days, maybe less if a ship is nearby." 14 days? Bohr's voice came out as a weak hiss. "We will not survive 14 hours in this temperature." Owen looked at his crew. They were all shutting down. Trill could barely stand. Bohr had stopped moving entirely, his cold-blooded body going into hibernation mode. Nessa remained unconscious on the floor. The ship's emergency heat system flickered weakly before dying completely. "Listen to me," Owen said firmly. "We're going to survive this. All of us." "Impossible," Bohr whispered. "Our biology cannot withstand such cold. Even yours will fail." Owen shook his head. "I've trained for worse than this. My grandfather survived 3 weeks in the Arctic with less gear than we have here." Trill looked at him with confusion in her large eyes. "Arctic? I do not understand this reference." "It's one of the frozen regions on Earth," Owen explained while pulling out thermal blankets. He wrapped one around Trill and another around Bohr. "Humans learned to survive in places like this thousands of years ago." He moved to Nessa and carefully wrapped her in 2 blankets. Her breathing was shallow but steady. "You 3 need to stay in the ship and conserve your energy. Keep these blankets tight. Don't move around." "Where are you going?" Trill asked with alarm in her voice. "Outside." Owen pulled on an insulated jacket from the emergency supplies. It wasn't much, but it would help. "I need to see what we're working with." "You will freeze," Bohr said. "Even humans cannot survive exposure to such temperatures." Owen smiled despite the situation. "You'd be surprised what humans can survive when we have to." He grabbed a plasma cutter, a flashlight, and a coil of rope from the supplies. "I'll be back in less than an hour. Keep each other warm." "This is madness," Trill chirped softly. "We should stay together in the ship and wait for rescue." The ship is dying, Owen said, gesturing at the failing systems around them. Life support is gone. Heat is gone. In a few hours, this cabin will be the same temperature as outside. At least out there I can find us something better. He moved to the damaged airlock. Cold wind howled through the gaps. Before stepping out, he turned back to his crew one more time. I've got this. Trust me. Owen pushed through the airlock into the frozen forest. The cold hit him like a physical force, but he started moving immediately. Movement created heat. He had learned that lesson long ago. His breath came out in white clouds as he surveyed their crash site. The ship had carved a long scar through the snow and trees. Debris was scattered everywhere. But Owen's eyes fixed on something else. About 50 meters away stood the largest tree he had ever seen. It was easily 20 meters wide at the base, and unless he was wrong, it looked hollow. He smiled again. His alien crew members thought he was walking to his death. They didn't understand. While they saw a frozen death trap, Owen Hayes saw opportunity. Owen's boots crunched through the snow as he approached the massive tree. His fingers had gone numb 5 minutes ago, but he kept flexing them to maintain blood flow. The tree trunk rose into the gray sky like an ancient tower. Up close, it was even more impressive than he'd thought. He placed his hand against the bark. Solid. Old. Probably hundreds of years growing in this frozen forest. But what mattered most was the dark, hollow space he could see at the base. Nature had rotted out the center while the outer shell remained strong. Perfect, he muttered to himself. Owen walked around the tree, examining it from every angle. The hollow opening was about 2 meters high and 1 meter wide. Inside, the space opened up considerably. He shined his flashlight into the darkness. The interior went up at least 10 meters before narrowing. The floor was covered in old dead wood and debris, but it was dry. Protected. He returned to the crash site, his mind already working through what needed to happen next. The ship had torn apart on impact. Sections of hull plating lay scattered in the snow. Wiring and components were everywhere. Most of it was junk now, but some pieces would be useful. Owen found a cargo sled that had been thrown from the hold. He dragged it through the snow back to the ship's main cabin. When he entered, he saw his crew exactly as he had left them. Trill was huddled in her blanket, barely conscious. Boar hadn't moved at all. Nessa was still out cold, still alive, Owen announced. Good, I found shelter. Trill's head lifted slightly. Shelter? There are no structures on this world. The survey data confirmed it. Who said anything about structures? Owen started gathering supplies. He took the plasma cutter to a wall panel and began cutting away sections of thermal insulation. Nature built us a home. I'm just going to improve it. I do not understand, Trill said weakly. You will. Owen worked quickly, cutting and stacking materials. Insulation panels, thermal blankets, heating elements from the damaged systems, even the cushions from the seats. He loaded everything onto the sled. You cannot work in this cold, Boar finally spoke. His words came slowly. Your body will shut down from exposure. Owen laughed while cutting another panel free. My body is built for this, Boar. Humans are endurance specialists. We can keep moving for hours in temperatures that would kill most species. Impossible, Boar hissed softly. No biological organism can maintain activity in such cold without technological assistance. Earth didn't give us a choice, Owen replied. He cut free a heating coil and examined it. Still functional. We evolved to outlast everything else. Persistence is what we do best. He made 3 trips from the ship to the tree, hauling supplies through the snow. Each time he returned, his alien crew members watched him with growing confusion. By their understanding of biology, Owen should have collapsed from hypothermia already. Instead, he moved faster with each trip. On the 4th trip, Trill tried to help. She stumbled out of the ship wrapped in her blanket, determined to carry something. She made it 5 steps before her legs gave out. Owen caught her before she hit the snow. Easy, he said gently, guiding her back inside. You conserve your energy. Let me do the heavy work. But you will exhaust yourself, Trill protested weakly. Then we all die, Owen shook his head. I'm barely getting started. He wasn't lying. His muscles were warm from the work. His breathing was steady. The cold was uncomfortable but manageable. My body generates heat through movement. The more I work, the warmer I stay. That makes no biological sense, Trill chirped. Tell that to my ancestors who hunted animals to exhaustion across the African plains. Owen said with a grin. Or the ones who crossed frozen land bridges during ice ages. Humans have been doing impossible things for a very long time. He left them again and returned to his tree. Night was falling, which meant the temperature would drop even further. Owen needed to work fast. He used the plasma cutter to widen the entrance slightly, making it easier to move materials inside but small enough to retain heat. Inside the hollow, he began construction. First, he cleared the debris from the floor, creating a flat space. Then he used pieces of hull plating to create a solid foundation. The thermal insulation panels went up next, lining the inner walls of the hollow. He secured them with salvaged bolts and wire. The work was precise. Every gap needed to be sealed. Every surface needed to insulate. Owen had built emergency shelters before during his military training, but never in conditions quite like this. The plasma cutter became his primary tool, shaping materials to fit the curved interior of the tree. Hours passed. The forest grew dark around him. Owen set up portable lights from the ship's emergency kit. They cast strange shadows on the snow outside. His hands moved with practiced efficiency. Cut, measure, fit, secure, repeat. He created a ventilation shaft using a section of pipe, running it up through the natural hollow of the tree. Smoke and carbon dioxide would escape while heat stayed low. Basic physics. Basic survival. The heating elements came next. He wired 3 of them together with a salvaged power cell. It wouldn't last forever, but it would buy them time. He placed them strategically around the space, creating zones of warmth. For the fire pit, Owen dug into the soft wood of the tree's inner floor, creating a shallow depression. He lined it with flat stones he'd found near the crash site. The stones would absorb heat and radiate it back long after the fire died down. He gathered dead wood from inside the hollow and from the forest floor nearby. The wood was frozen, but it would dry quickly near the heat. Owen arranged it carefully in the pit, then used the chemical igniter from the survival kit to start a small flame. Fire bloomed in the darkness. Orange light filled the hollow tree. Owen sat back and watched it grow. For the first time since the crash, he allowed himself to feel the exhaustion in his muscles. But there was still work to do. He made beds from branches and cushions, raising them off the ground. Cold air sank, so sleeping elevated would keep them warmer. He hung thermal blankets as curtains to section off sleeping areas. He even carved small shelves into the soft inner wood for storing supplies. By the time he finished, the interior temperature had climbed to just above freezing. The fire crackled cheerfully. The space smelled like smoke and pine. It wasn't comfortable by most standards, but it was warm. It was dry. It was survival. Owen looked at his work with satisfaction. Now he just needed to get his crew from the ship to the shelter before they froze to death. He stepped outside. The temperature had dropped to minus 35 degrees. The wind had picked up. Snow fell in gentle flurries. Owen started walking back to the ship, his breath forming clouds in the frozen air. Behind him, smoke rose from the ventilation shaft of the hollow tree. In a landscape of death, he had created life. Dawn brought no warmth to the frozen forest. Owen had worked through the entire night without sleep. His body ached in places he'd forgotten could hurt. But when he entered the damaged ship, he knew he'd made the right choice staying awake. Bohr had stopped moving completely. The reptilian alien lay curled in his thermal blanket, his body in full hibernation mode. His scales had turned almost black. Frost had formed on his snout. Trill was barely better. She made small chirping sounds in her sleep. Her feathers fluffed up to trap what little warmth remained. But the ship's interior temperature had dropped to minus 20 degrees. Even wrapped in blankets, she was dying slowly. Nessa hadn't woken up since the crash. Her amphibious skin had dried out completely, cracking in places. Without moisture and heat, her body was shutting down system by system. Owen moved quickly. He checked Bohr first, finding a weak pulse. Still alive, but fading. All right, big guy. Time to move. He carefully wrapped Bohr in 2 more thermal blankets, creating a cocoon. The reptilian alien weighed about 90 kilograms, heavy but manageable. Owen lifted him in a fireman's carry across his shoulders. The walk to the tree shelter took 10 minutes. Owen's legs burned with effort, but he kept his breathing steady. When he reached the hollow, he carefully laid Bohr near the fire. The alien's body was cold as stone. "Stay with me," Owen muttered, adding more wood to the fire. The flames grew higher. Heat began to fill the space. He ran back to the ship. Literally ran despite the exhaustion in his muscles. Trill needed to be moved before her body gave up entirely. When he entered the cabin, she was awake but couldn't stand. "Am I dying?" she asked simply. "Not today," Owen said. He scooped her up. She weighed almost nothing, her hollow bones making her incredibly light. "I've got you. You should save yourself," Trill whispered. "Leave us. You could survive alone." Owen didn't bother responding to that. He carried her through the snow to the shelter. Inside, Boar had started to move slightly. The heat was reaching him. Owen placed Trill on one of the raised beds near the fire. "Rest," he told her. "Let the warmth do its work. You built this in one night?" Trill's eyes went wide as she looked around the shelter. "This is impossible." "Difficult, not impossible," Owen corrected. He was already heading back to the ship for Nessa. Humans have a saying, "Necessity is the mother of invention." The third rescue was the hardest. Nessa needed moisture as well as heat. Owen had prepared for this, melting snow in a metal container over the fire before he'd gone to get the others. Now that water was warm, almost hot, he carried Nessa's unconscious form to the shelter and laid her on a bed closest to the fire. Then he carefully poured small amounts of warm water over her cracked skin. Her body absorbed it desperately. He continued this for nearly an hour, re-wetting her skin every few minutes. Finally, her eyes fluttered open. "Where?" she managed to ask, her voice rough. "Safe," Owen replied. "You're safe now." Nessa looked around the shelter with confusion. "How is this possible? We crashed on an uninhabited ice world." "We did," Owen confirmed. He gestured at the tree walls around them. "Nature provided the structure. I just made it livable." Boar had fully woken by now. His scales had returned to their normal green color. He sat up slowly, looking around with what Owen recognized as shock. "You created shelter from organic material and salvage. In one night. While we slept. You weren't sleeping, you were dying," Owen said bluntly. He added more wood to the fire. "And yes, one night. Would have been faster, but I had to make multiple trips for supplies." "Your species is biologically abnormal," Boar stated. It wasn't an insult, just an observation. No other known species can maintain this level of activity in such temperatures. Owen shrugged. "Earth made us tough. You adapt or you die. Humans chose to adapt." Trill had been studying the construction of the shelter. Her scientific mind was working despite her exhaustion. The thermal insulation is placed to maximize heat retention. The ventilation prevents carbon dioxide buildup. The elevated sleeping platforms account for cold air density. You understood complex thermodynamics and applied them with primitive materials. "I understood that cold air sinks and hot air rises," Owen said simply. "The rest is just common sense." "Nothing about this is common," Nessa said softly. She was still weak, but her color was returning. "We would have died in the ship, all of us. Within hours." Owen didn't argue. It was true. "But you didn't die. You're here. You're warm. That's what matters." He spent the rest of the day improving the shelter. Now that his crew was stable, he could focus on making the space more comfortable. He created a storage area for supplies. He built a simple door for the entrance using hull plating, insulated with moss and sealed with packed snow around the edges. The aliens watched him work with growing amazement. Every few hours, Owen would venture outside to gather more firewood or check the ship for additional supplies. Each time he would return after 20 or 30 minutes of exposure to the brutal cold, seemingly unaffected. "Do you not feel the cold?" Trill finally asked. "Your skin is exposed. You should be experiencing severe pain." "I feel it," Owen admitted. "My face hurts. My fingers go numb. But I keep moving, keep the blood flowing. Pain is just information. It tells me to be careful, not to stop." "Your pain tolerance is exceptional," Boar observed. "Most species would be incapacitated by the nerve signals you are ignoring." Owen thought about that while arranging firewood in neat stacks. Maybe, or maybe humans just learned to push through pain because quitting meant death. Our ancestors didn't have the luxury of giving up. By evening, the shelter had transformed. What started as a hollow tree was now a functional living space. The fire provided steady heat. The insulated walls kept warmth inside. The ventilation system worked perfectly. Temperature inside stayed around 5 degrees above freezing, which felt tropical compared to outside. Owen prepared food from the ship's emergency rations. He heated water for drinking. He even found some dried meat in the survival kit and cooked it over the fire. The smell filled the shelter, making it feel almost cozy. The 3 aliens ate slowly, their bodies still recovering. They watched Owen move around the space with efficient grace. He never stopped. Even while eating, he was adjusting something, improving something, planning the next task. Do humans ever rest? Nessa asked quietly. Owen smiled. Eventually. When the work is done. He poked at the fire, sending sparks dancing upward through the ventilation shaft. Besides, I slept on the trip here. I'm good for another day at least. You have not slept since the crash, Bohr pointed out. That was over 30 hours ago. 32, Owen corrected. And I've gone longer. Military training included 72-hour exercises with no sleep. You learn to function on willpower alone. The aliens exchanged glances. Something was becoming clear to them. The human wasn't just surviving in conditions that would kill them. He was thriving. While they had given up hope within hours of the crash, Owen had spent that same time building a home from nothing. Night fell again. Temperature outside dropped to -40 degrees. Wind howled through the trees. But inside the hollow, the fire burned warm and steady. Owen finally allowed himself to sit. He leaned against the curved wall, feeling the exhaustion catch up to him. His eyes grew heavy. You should sleep, Trill said gently. We will maintain the fire. We owe you that much. Owen wanted to argue, but his body had reached its limit. Wake me if anything goes wrong. He closed his eyes. Within seconds, he was asleep. His 3 crew members watched over him, protected by the shelter he had built with his own hands while they had been too weak to help. For the first time since the crash, they all believed they might actually survive until rescue came. Owen slept for 6 hours. When he woke, the fire was still going and his crew members were talking quietly among themselves. They stopped when they noticed him stirring. Morning, Owen said, stretching. His muscles protested but felt better than expected. Everyone still alive? Yes, Trill replied. She had been sketching something in the frost on the wall, diagrams and notes in her own language. I have been analyzing your shelter construction. The engineering is remarkable given the available materials. It's just basic survival techniques, Owen said. He checked the wood supply. Running low. I'll need to gather more firewood soon. I will accompany you, Bohr offered. The reptilian alien had recovered significantly. I should contribute to our survival, Owen shook his head. You're cold-blooded. 5 minutes outside and you'll shut down again. Better you stay here and keep the fire going. He pulled on his jacket. Besides, I need you 3 to do something more important. What task? Nessa asked. She looked much healthier now that her skin had been regularly moistened. Talk, Owen said simply. Tell me about your worlds. Your people, where you evolved. I want to understand why the cold affects you so differently than it affects me. He left before they could respond, stepping out into the frozen morning. The temperature had risen slightly, only -30 degrees now. Owen considered that practically warm. He began gathering fallen branches and dead wood from the forest floor. Inside the shelter, the 3 aliens looked at each other. He wants to understand our biology? Trill said with curiosity in her voice. Why? Perhaps to better help us survive, Bohr suggested. Humans appear to value knowledge. Or perhaps he is simply curious, Nessa added. We should honor his request. He saved our lives. The least we can do is share our stories. When Owen returned with an armload of firewood, he found them waiting eagerly to talk. He settled by the fire and listened while he worked on carving a better door handle. Trill spoke first. Her homeworld was called Avon, a planet with mild temperatures and low gravity. Her species evolved in tropical forests where food was abundant and predators were few. We never faced harsh conditions, she explained. Our evolution favored intelligence and tool use over physical resilience. Bohr described his world next. A desert planet with extreme heat during the day but only moderate cold at night. His people were cold-blooded, absorbing warmth from their environment. We built our civilization around temperature regulation, he said. Our cities have climate control everywhere. Unregulated environments are considered dangerous. Nessa's world was almost entirely ocean. Her amphibious species lived in warm, shallow waters near volcanic vents. They had only developed land technology in the last few centuries. We require moisture constantly, she explained. And temperatures below 10 degrees cause our metabolism to slow dangerously. Owen listened carefully while he worked. So all 3 of your species evolved on worlds that were basically paradise compared to Earth. What is Earth like? Trill asked. You mention it often with a tone of respect. Owen paused his carving. Earth is beautiful and terrible. We have deserts that reach 70 degrees in summer and drop below freezing at night. We have jungles so humid you can't breathe properly. We have mountains where the air is too thin to survive without equipment. We have polar regions where this, he gestured outside, would be considered a mild day. The alien stared at him. Your world attempted to kill you? Bohr asked. Constantly, Owen confirmed. Ice ages, droughts, floods, volcanic eruptions, earthquakes, hurricanes. Earth threw everything at humanity for millions of years. Most species that couldn't adapt went extinct. Humans survived by becoming the most stubborn, adaptable creatures on the planet. That explains your physiology, Trill said thoughtfully. Your endurance, your temperature regulation, your pain tolerance. These are adaptations to a hostile environment. We call it a death world, Owen said with a slight smile. Other species use that term for planets too dangerous to colonize. But we were born there. It's just home to us. Nessa shivered despite the fire's warmth. How did your ancestors survive before technology? Owen set down his carving. They walked. Humans are persistence hunters. We would chase prey for hours, sometimes days, until the animal collapsed from exhaustion. We can't run fast, but we never stop. We sweat to cool down, which lets us keep moving when other animals overheat. We can eat almost anything organic. We can survive injuries that would kill most species. We heal fast and adapt faster. Your species weaponized endurance, Bohr said with something like awe in his voice. You became unstoppable through sheer persistence. Pretty much, Owen agreed. We're not the strongest or fastest or smartest species in the galaxy, but we don't quit. Ever. Over the following days, Owen continued to improve their situation. He built better furniture from salvaged materials and wood. He created a water collection system using snow and heated stones. He even fashioned crude dishes from bark and resin. Each improvement seemed impossible to the aliens, yet Owen made it look routine. They began to understand something profound about humanity. What they saw as desperate survival, Owen treated as normal camping. On the fourth day after the crash, Owen left the shelter with a sharpened piece of metal he'd fashioned into a spear. Going hunting, he announced. We need protein. Hunting? Trill chirped with alarm. The native fauna could be dangerous. Then I'll be careful. Owen replied and disappeared into the trees. He returned 3 hours later dragging a creature that looked like a cross between a deer and a large rabbit. It was frozen solid, but Owen had tracked it through the snow, chased it for over an hour, and finally brought it down with his improvised spear. The aliens watched in fascinated horror as Owen skinned and butchered the animal with practiced efficiency. He explained each step, teaching them about field dressing and meat preservation. Your species hunted animals this way? Nessa asked. Before you had advanced weapons? For hundreds of thousands of years, Owen confirmed. He set strips of meat to cook over the fire. With nothing but sharpened stones and patience. We ran them to exhaustion, then killed them. It took all day sometimes, but we never gave up. You turned your endurance into a weapon, Bohr said quietly. The prey could not rest, so they eventually collapsed. Humans simply outlasted them. That's evolution for you, Owen said. We're not built to win the fight quickly. We're built to still be standing when everyone else has fallen. The cooked meat was a huge morale boost. Fresh food tasted infinitely better than rations. Owen even used some of the animal's fat to improve the shelter's insulation, sealing gaps he'd missed before. That evening, while they ate, Trill continued her observations. I have been documenting everything. When we are rescued, I intend to write a paper about human survival capabilities. The scientific community needs to understand what your species can accomplish. I'm not special, Owen protested. Any human with basic training could do this. That statement only proves how exceptional your species is, Bohr replied. You consider the impossible to be basic. You have redefined our understanding of biological limitations. Owen looked uncomfortable with the praise. I'm just doing what needs to be done. That's not exceptional, it's necessary. No, Nessa said softly. It is both. You transformed a death sentence into merely an inconvenience. You built a home from a tree. You hunted with primitive tools. You saved 3 aliens who are supposed to be your intellectual equals, but who would have died without you. That is exceptional, whether you admit it or not. Owen didn't know what to say to that. He poked at the fire, watching sparks rise toward the ventilation shaft. Outside, wind howled through the frozen forest. Inside, 4 very different beings sat in warmth and safety. My world tried to kill my species for millions of years. Owen finally said. So we learned to kill it back. We turned hostile environments into homes. We made the uninhabitable livable. That's not exceptional to humans. That's just what we do. It's who we are. The three aliens looked at each other. A silent understanding passed between them. They had always known humans were intelligent and capable, but now they understood something deeper. Humans weren't just another species that had reached the stars. They were survivors from a world that made most planets look gentle by comparison. They were the species that refused to die. The barometric sensor from the ship's salvaged equipment started dropping rapidly on the 7th day. Owen watched the numbers carefully while the others slept. He'd seen enough weather patterns to know what was coming. Wake up, he said gently but firmly. We have a problem. The three aliens stirred from their beds. Trill was the first to fully wake. What is wrong? Owen pointed to the sensor. Big storm coming. Pressure drop is significant. We're talking blizzard conditions, probably the worst since we crashed. Bohr looked at the readings and his scales paled slightly. How severe? Temperature will drop to -45, maybe lower. Wind speeds over 60 kilometers per hour. Visibility near zero. Owen was already moving, checking their supplies. We need to prepare now. Are we in danger? Nessa asked with worry in her voice. Will the shelter hold? The shelter will hold, Owen assured her. But we need more firewood, more water stored, and better insulation on that door. I'd give us 3 hours before it hits. He was right. The storm arrived exactly 2 hours and 40 minutes later. It started with wind, not the gentle breeze they'd experienced before, but a roaring monster that shook the trees and drove snow horizontally through the forest. The temperature plummeted. Within an hour, it had dropped 20 degrees. Inside the shelter, the three aliens huddled close to the fire. They could hear the storm screaming outside. Wind found every tiny gap in their walls, whistling through like angry ghosts. Despite Owen's preparations, cold air was seeping in. The temperature inside is dropping, Trill observed with fear. She checked their makeshift thermometer. We are at -5 degrees now. It continues to fall. Owen added more wood to the fire. He'd stockpiled enough to last 3 days of heavy burning. The tree's insulation is good, but this storm is exceptional. We just need to maintain the fire and stay close together. Will that be sufficient? Bohr asked. Even with the fire, he was beginning to slow down again. It will be, Owen said with confidence. Trust me. But as the hours passed and the storm intensified, even Owen's optimism was tested. The wind grew so strong it was creating a draft through the ventilation shaft, making the fire difficult to maintain. Snow was actually coming down through the chimney, hissing when it hit the flames. I need to fix the ventilation, Owen announced. He started pulling on extra layers. You cannot go outside in this, Nessa said with alarm. The conditions will kill you in minutes. I've been in worse, Owen replied. It wasn't entirely true, but close enough. I'll be fast. Keep the fire going. He stepped through the door into chaos. The wind hit him like a physical force, nearly knocking him off his feet. Snow was so thick he couldn't see more than 2 meters in any direction. The cold was immediate and brutal, finding every exposed bit of skin. Owen climbed the tree using handholds he'd carved days ago for this exact purpose. His fingers went numb within seconds. His face felt like it was being stabbed with thousands of needles. But he reached the top of the ventilation shaft and quickly secured a salvaged piece of mesh over it. The mesh would let smoke out but keep most of the snow from falling in. The climb down was harder. His hands barely worked. His body was shaking violently. When he finally stumbled back through the door, his lips were blue and frost had formed in his eyebrows and beard. You are hypothermic, Trill said with panic. Your core temperature has dropped dangerously. Just need to warm up, Owen managed through chattering teeth. He sat close to the fire, flexing his fingers and toes. Slowly, painfully, feeling returned. His shivering eventually stopped. That was foolish, Bohr said, though his tone carried respect rather than criticism. You risked death to improve our comfort. I risked discomfort to prevent death, Owen corrected once he could speak normally. If that shaft had gotten blocked with snow, we'd have carbon dioxide buildup. We'd all suffocate in our sleep. The storm raged for 18 hours straight. During that time, Owen went outside twice more. Once to clear snow that was building up against their door. Once to retrieve additional supplies he'd stored near the ship. Each time, the aliens watched him leave with dread and welcomed him back with relief. Each time Owen returned covered in frost but still moving, still thinking, still surviving. How are you doing this? Trill finally asked after his third return from the storm. Your physiology should not allow for repeated exposure to such extremes. Owen was warming his hands over the fire again. Humans explored both poles of Earth centuries before we had any real technology to protect us. They wore animal furs and walked across ice for months. Some of them died, sure, but many survived. They learned that you can endure almost anything if you keep moving, keep eating, keep your will strong. Will? Nessa repeated softly. You speak of it as if it is a physical attribute, isn't it? Owen looked at her seriously. Your body can only do what your mind allows. Most species have biological stops that prevent them from pushing too hard. Humans have those stops too, but we learn to ignore them. We can literally force our bodies to keep functioning past the point where we should collapse. That sounds like a design flaw, Bohr observed. Owen laughed. Maybe. But it's also why humans survived when Earth tried to kill us. We're too stubborn to die when we're supposed to. As the storm continued, Owen kept himself busy. He couldn't go outside, so he improved the shelter from within. He carved better shelves. He wove a basket from strips of bark. He even created a crude musical instrument from a hollowed piece of wood and salvaged wire. The aliens watched this with amazement. While they sat huddled by the fire, barely able to function in their anxiety about the storm, Owen was calm. He hummed while he worked. He occasionally made jokes. He acted like being trapped in a tree during a deadly blizzard was just a minor inconvenience. Do you not feel fear? Trill asked him. The storm outside could easily kill us if our shelter fails. Owen paused his carving. Of course I feel fear. Fear is good. It keeps you alert. But I don't let fear control me. I acknowledge it, understand what it's warning me about, then I do what needs to be done anyway. That is not how most species handle fear, Bohr said. Most biological organisms are paralyzed by extreme stress. Humans get an adrenaline boost, Owen explained. When we're scared or stressed, our bodies dump chemicals into our blood that make us faster, stronger, and more focused. It's a combat response. Our ancestors faced predators that could kill them, so we evolved to become more dangerous when threatened. You become more capable when under threat? Nessa asked with disbelief. That is backwards from every other species I know. Owen shrugged. Welcome to human biology. We're weird. The storm finally began to weaken on the second day. The wind died down gradually. The snow lessened from a blinding wall to occasional flurries. The temperature slowly climbed back to merely terrible instead of lethal. Owen waited until he was certain it was safe, then ventured outside to assess the situation. The forest had been transformed. Snow had piled up in huge drifts. Several smaller trees had been knocked down by the wind. The crash site was almost completely buried, but the great hollow tree stood firm. Owen's shelter had survived without even a crack in its walls. He smiled with satisfaction. Good engineering was good engineering, whether you built with metal or wood. When he returned inside, he found his crew members had prepared a celebration of sorts. They'd heated extra rations and had water boiling for drinks. Trill had even arranged their sleeping area to look more organized and comfortable. We survived the storm, she announced. Thanks to this shelter and thanks to you. Owen waved off the praise. The tree did most of the work. I just helped it along. No, Bohr said firmly. You built this sanctuary. You maintained it through the worst conditions this planet could produce. You went into the storm 3 times to protect us. Do not diminish what you accomplished. I did what anyone would do, Owen insisted. The 3 aliens looked at each other, then back at him. No, they said in unison. You did what only a human would do. Owen didn't argue further. He sat by the fire and accepted the warm drink Nessa offered. Outside, the storm had passed, leaving behind a frozen landscape that would have killed them all without shelter. Inside the hollow tree, 4 beings from different worlds sat together in warmth and safety. 3 of them finally understood what it meant to be human, to face impossible odds and simply refuse to lose, to take a death sentence and turn it into merely an uncomfortable week. The rescue ship should arrive in about 6 more days, Owen said, checking the beacon. We'll make it easily now. Looking around the shelter at the stockpiled supplies and the roaring fire, none of them doubted it. With Owen Hayes, survival wasn't just possible. It was inevitable. The rescue ship detected their beacon on the 13th day. Owen was outside gathering firewood when he saw the contrail cutting across the gray sky. He dropped his bundle and ran back to the shelter. They're here, he announced. I saw the descent burn. They'll land within the hour. The aliens looked at each other with mixed emotions. Relief, certainly. But also something else. Something like sadness. We are leaving this place, Trill said quietly. I should be more pleased than I am. It's been home for almost 2 weeks, Owen said, understanding. It's natural to feel attached. Boar looked around the shelter one last time. I never thought I would feel sentiment for a primitive dwelling made from a tree. Yet I do. They gathered their few possessions and made sure the fire was safely extinguished. Owen took one last look at his handiwork. The insulated walls, the raised beds, the carved furniture, the ventilation system. It had kept them alive when nothing else could have. Someone else might crash here someday, he said. At least they'll have shelter waiting. The rescue ship landed in the clearing near the crash site. It was a proper search and rescue vessel, equipped with medical facilities and plenty of crew. The boarding ramp lowered and a team rushed out with medical equipment. Captain Rhodes, a tall woman with gray hair, led the team. She stopped short when she saw the 4 survivors walking toward her under their own power. You're all alive? An ambulatory. All alive, Owen confirmed. Battered but healthy. We detected your beacon 13 days ago, Rhodes said with shock in her voice. The conditions here are lethal. The analysis said you had maybe 48 hours before hypothermia would claim you. How did you survive? Trill chirped with excitement. Owen built us a shelter. From a tree, with salvaged materials. You must see it. Rhodes looked at Owen with raised eyebrows. You built a shelter? In these conditions? Basic survival techniques, Owen said simply. Nothing special. Captain, you truly must see what he created, Boar insisted. It is remarkable. Rhodes sent her medical team to scan the survivors while she, along with 2 other crew members, followed the aliens back to the hollow tree. When they saw the shelter, they stopped and stared. This is incredible, Rhodes said, stepping inside. She examined the insulated walls, the fire pit with its stone lining, the ventilation system, the carved furniture. You built this entire structure by yourself? I had some help, Owen said, gesturing to his crew. They maintained the fire and managed supplies once they recovered. We did almost nothing, Trill corrected. Owen worked for 30 hours straight building this place while we were too cold to even stand. Then he carried us here one by one and nursed us back to health. One of the rescue crew, an engineer named Davis, was examining the construction closely. The thermal efficiency here is exceptional. The materials are crude, but the application is brilliant. This would keep the interior at survivable temperatures even in the worst storms. It did, Nessa confirmed. We survived an 18-hour blizzard with temperatures reaching minus 45 degrees. Inside we stayed warm and safe. Rhodes turned to Owen. How long have you been training in extreme survival situations? Basic military survival school, Owen replied. Plus some Arctic training during my service. Nothing extensive. Nothing extensive, Rhodes repeated with disbelief. She looked at the shelter again. This is graduate-level wilderness survival engineering. Most trained specialists couldn't build something this functional with these materials. Owen shrugged uncomfortably. I just did what made sense. The medical scans came back. The doctor, a Centauran named Fell, approached with the results. The 3 non-human crew members show signs of severe cold exposure, but they've recovered remarkably well. No permanent damage. Their survival is frankly miraculous. What about Owen? Rhodes asked. Fell consulted his scanner. Minor frostbite on his fingers and toes, already healing. Some muscle strain. Exhaustion. But his core temperature and vital signs are normal. He's in better condition than survivors we've rescued from much less hostile environments. Of course he is, Boar said. He is human. They do not break easily. Rhodes arranged for the survivors to be transported to the ship. Before they left, Trill insisted on taking detailed scans and photographs of the shelter. This must be documented, she explained. For scientific purposes. And for history, Nessa added. This is the shelter where Owen Hayes proved what humans are truly capable of. Owen helped them carry their few belongings to the rescue ship. As they walked, Rhodes fell into step beside him. I've been doing search and rescue for 20 years. I've pulled survivors from all kinds of disasters. But I've never seen anything like this. Like what? Owen asked. Most survivors wait to be rescued. They conserve their energy, make their supplies last, hope help arrives in time. You didn't wait. You took an impossible situation and made it livable. You didn't just survive, you thrived. I did what needed to be done, Owen said. That's all. No, Rhodes said firmly. That's not all. Do you understand how rare it is for every crew member to survive a crash like yours? On a planet with these conditions? The statistical probability was less than 5%. For all of you to survive and be healthy? That shouldn't be possible. They reached the rescue ship. The aliens were already aboard, being checked by medical staff. Rhodes stopped Owen before he could board. The investigation team examined your crashed ship. Life support failed completely within 6 hours of impact. The interior temperature dropped to lethal levels. If you had stayed there, all 4 of you would have died that first night. Owen nodded. I know, that's why I built the shelter. In one night. While suffering from injuries. In minus 30-degree weather. Carrying 3 unconscious crew members through snow. Rhodes shook her head. That's not normal capability, Hayes. That's exceptional by any standard. Captain, with respect, any trained human could have done the same thing. That's my point, Rhodes said quietly. Do you know what the rest of the galaxy calls Earth? Owen smiled slightly. I've heard the term Death World. Yes, because by galactic standards, Earth is a nightmare planet. Temperature extremes, violent weather, dangerous wildlife, natural disasters. Most species couldn't survive a week there without technology. But humans, you were born there. You evolved there. You're built for impossible conditions. They entered the ship together. In the medical bay, Trill was already working on her documentation. She had convinced the ship's computer to let her begin drafting her paper. I am titling it Death World Adaptations, a case study in human survival capability, she announced. Owen, I will need your permission to use your name and actions as the primary example. I'd really rather you didn't, Owen said. I'm not comfortable being held up as special. Then I will respect your privacy, Trill agreed. But the data must be shared. Other species need to understand what humans can accomplish. It could save lives. Bohr approached Owen with something in his hands. I carved this while you were outside. A gift. It was a small wooden figure of a human standing beside a tree. The craftsmanship was crude, but the meaning was clear. This is the image I will remember, Bohr said. A human who refused to surrender. Who built life from death, who saved those who could not save themselves. Nessa added her own gesture, a woven bracelet made from salvaged wire. You gave us life when we had none. This is insufficient thanks, but please accept it. Owen looked at the gifts, then at his crew members. They had been strangers thrown together by accident. Now they were something else. Something more. Thank you, he said simply, for trusting me when things looked hopeless. You never let it be hopeless, Trill chirped. That is what humans do. You face the impossible and make it possible through sheer determination. The rescue ship lifted off, leaving the frozen forest behind. From orbit they could see Owen's shelter, a small dark spot in the endless white. It would stand there for years, maybe decades, a testament to human persistence. Weeks later, back at the central station, Owen was called to a ceremony. The 3 aliens had nominated him for the highest civilian honor given by the Galactic Union, the Medal for Extraordinary Courage and Life-Saving Action. Owen tried to decline. The Union insisted, so he stood on a stage in front of hundreds of beings from dozens of species and accepted an award he didn't think he deserved. Captain Rhodes presented it personally. Owen Hayes, for actions above and beyond any reasonable expectation, for preserving life in impossible conditions, for demonstrating the highest ideals of cooperation and sacrifice. The Galactic Union honors you. The applause was deafening. Owen endured it with as much grace as he could manage. When it finally ended and he could leave the stage, he found Trill, Bohr, and Nessa waiting for him. I still don't think I deserve this, he told them. I just did my job. And that is exactly why you deserve it, Trill replied. You cannot see how exceptional you are because to you, survival is normal. But you made us understand something important about humanity. What's that? Owen asked. That when the galaxy faces impossible challenges, when conditions are at their worst, when all hope seems lost, Bohr said slowly, we should call the humans. Because they have never learned how to give up. Owen smiled at that. I suppose that's fair. We are pretty stubborn. Stubborn, Nessa repeated. Yes, that is a good word for humanity. Beautifully, impossibly stubborn. 6 months passed. Owen went back to flying cargo routes. The ceremony faded from memory. Life returned to normal. But the story of the shelter in the frozen forest spread across the galaxy. It became a teaching example in survival courses. It was analyzed in engineering classes. It was discussed in biology seminars. The paper Trill published became one of the most cited scientific documents in recent history. It included detailed analysis of human physiology, endurance capabilities, and adaptive problem-solving. It compared human survival traits to those of other species and concluded that Earth's hostile environment had created a species uniquely suited for extreme conditions. Owen never read it. He was too busy flying his next cargo run, but others read it. Others learned from it, and slowly across the galaxy understanding grew. Humans were not just another intelligent species that had reached the stars. They were survivors from a world that had tried to kill them for millions of years. And because Earth had failed to destroy them, nothing else in the galaxy would succeed either. That was the real revelation of the frozen forest. Not that one human had saved 3 aliens, but that humanity as a whole had been forged in conditions that would have exterminated most other species. They had adapted, persisted, and refused to die. In a universe full of intelligent beings, humans were the ones who simply wouldn't quit. And that made all the difference.